that you like to focus on, put it down there, and I'll try to see if I can hit it in different in one of the sessions that we're going to do. I'm passing around prayer books also because we're going to try to gain a little bit of familiarity and comfortability with this. Okay, good. So let's jump in. Here, let's do this actually. It's the course structure, okay? So the course is going to take place over 5 weeks. Now, when I looked at it and I looked at the dates, it's like, wow, what was I thinking? There's really 6 weeks. But then I remembered that I thought it through. And May 27th, there's no class because there's Memorial Day. So there's really 6 weeks, but it's 5 classes. And this is what we're going to try to cover in those classes. Today, we're going to do Intro to the Siddur in general. We're going to figure out what the Siddur is, what the structure of the Siddur is. We're going to talk about inner structure in different parts of prayer. And in a certain part we're going to focus on is Pesukei DeZimra. Okay, we're going to talk about that. Today we're also going to talk about Adon Olam. I have the key for understanding Adon Olam. Okay, so a key, not the key, a key. So I'm going to try to give that to you, and we'll try to think about ourselves. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about we'll see a few other topics too, and then Kaddish and Pesukei DeZimra. So this is an important topic. Kaddish people are big. People come here a lot to say Kaddish, and then just come to something like just to say Kaddish. We often don't know what we're saying, so we're going to learn about the Kaddish then. Shema Yisrael and its blessings. The Amida, that's big. The 18 blessings. Amida, Aleinu, and others. So we're going to fit in, try to do other things here. Maybe some of the things you put down on your sheets, on the sheet there, and. Amidst, we're going to do other stuff too. We're going to throw in different prayers. We're going to throw in different words. We're going to learn, just like the beginner's class, kind of just like a smorgasbord of things. But this is the general framework, the general scale of the structure. So that's kind of like where we're going to be going. Now, in terms of today, all of our classes are going to go like this. They're going to, there's going to be what I call a daily break. I don't know why I called it that. I was looking for a better title, but that's the best one I found. Where it's just like a break from what we're doing, and it's going to be about prayer movements. Okay, so sometimes there's different types of movements that you do during prayer. The first one we're talking about those who are in the young professional group, they've heard some of this before, but maybe it'll be a good review. So what I'm doing right now, SHUCKLING, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this one, talk about this one. We're going to talk about when you sit, when you stand, why we're doing all that. So if you ever come to prayers, at least in the high holidays, there's a lot of exercise going on. You're sitting, all right, please stand, please sit. Like, why are we doing it? Why are we getting up? Why are we sitting down? What's the logic behind that? I'm going to try to explain that as we go along. So that's in the beginning of each class. We're going to have discussions on a different movement each time. We're going to have discussions about different laws connected to prayer and different words. Same thing we did before with words for the beginner's class. We're going to have words, like 5 words a day, and connected to the Siddur. Okay. Today's class will be getting familiar with the Siddur, Adon Olam. We'll talk about Adon Olam. Pesukei DeZimra, Baruch Shamar. I hope we're going to get to your stuff. We probably won't, but we're going to continue this topic of Pesukei DeZimra next class. Now, if you don't know what Pesukei DeZimra is, that's okay. That's why you're here. Okay. So if you do, that's good too. You'll learn more about it. Okay. So that's kind of like the structure and where we're going to go today. Any questions at this point? Okay, so let's start the daily break. Everybody ready for the daily break? Okay. Okay, so let's start with movements. This is the movement of the day, the shuckling. Okay, so why do we shuckle? Okay. Okay. So it's interesting to point out that shuckling isn't. So the question is shuckling a unique Jewish expression? This is the one I wanted. Is it a Jewish movement? Is it uniquely Jewish? Right? Have you been in any churches or any mosques that you've seen them shuckle? I don't know what's happening. You've seen them shuckle, right? So they don't. I don't know if that. I've. One second. Let's just do it this way. Okay. You can still see it, right? For the most part? No? Yeah. It's kind of hard to read that, no? From back there? All right. It's okay. I'll read some of it to you. Any case, so you haven't really seen so many other religions shekels. The question is like, is this a Jewish thing, and where did it come from? And so here are two. I did a little bit of research on this a while ago. I thought about this in different formats, but there is a source that goes back all the way, ostensibly to Muhammad, where he made his faithful followers aware in the most likely authentic remark of this habit of the Jews. He says, "Don't be like the Jews who shekel, who are reciting the Torah in public, sway back and forth." This is from Arab remarks about customs of the Jews during prayer and study. This is from a journal, and it was translated to English. So apparently, Jews were shuckling already back in the 7th century, if you think this is authentic. There's another statement here from 1470 in an Inquisition trial. Witnesses testified that they saw people praying with movements of the head and body in the manner of the Jews. All right, so these are texts that go back a long time ago. It says the Jews are moving like this when they were davening, davening is praying, or when they're studying. So the question is, so apparently this is somewhat of a Jewish thing. I don't know if it's uniquely Jewish. Now, the question is, why do we shekel? All right, so there are a few different approaches to this. One approach is Rabbi Yehuda Levi's approach, which is just a really pragmatic one. Okay, he says like this. He says, "They say that it's done in order to arouse natural heat." So some people say that we do it because when you're cold, you want to arouse your heat, so you start moving your body. But he says, my personal belief is that, what's his personal belief? Often happened that many persons read at the same time. It was possible that 10 or more read from one volume. So a long time ago, people didn't have many books, right? You didn't have the internet. You didn't have many books. I guess people were passing around before the printing press. Books are rare, so many people would huddle around this one book. And his statement was that when people were trying to get in there to read the book from different directions, they were, bopping their heads to read the book. It's starting from the 12th century. That's his theory. And so after a while, people were bopping their heads all over, and then other people started seeing that habit, and they started to say, oh, maybe that's what you're supposed to do when you learn. And everyone started bopping their heads. So that's his theory, okay? This is a while ago, 12th century. But two other theories that are also that are more widely quoted are the Sefer Hasidim, which is like the 12th and 13th century. He says that when we pray, we want to engage our whole body. Okay, so it's not just in our minds, but it's also in our bodies. We're moving our body when we're praying, and he brings a verse, "My whole being will exclaim, who is like you, Lord." And that's from Psalms. So that's another theory behind it. I don't know how it started, but apparently at a certain point, Jews wanted to move their whole body, or they felt that they were completely connected, so they moved their body. But the most common one that's expressed, and this is the reason why I'm bringing this right now in this class, like I could have brought other movements. Why am I bringing this one? Because my hope is that through this workshop, and like that's just a start, but that through time, the prayer will be something you'll be able to connect to on a deeper level. It won't just be something that, unfortunately, everyone kind of falls. Unfortunately, we fall into this oftentimes in synagogues where you just come and you just kind of like breeze through the prayers, or you don't really know what you're saying, and there's a value in like just reciting the prayers with not always having the deepest intention. I often say it's kind of like it's like being in a relationship. Not every single moment you're like in the most romantic space. A lot of times you're just getting up, you're getting the kids out to school, you're eating something together, or you're just passing by each other. Life is kind of like that. You have to maintain that connection all the time. But the ideal is to find those moments you can have connection and intimacy. And so that's really like our goal. It's like you're not always going to be in the highest level in terms of davening, but hopefully you'll find pathways into that moment, those moments of intimacy and connection. So that's what this workshop is supposed to be about, and ideally like what your continued study on this topic is supposed to be about. So that's why. So that's connected to this final approach, which says something like this: the souls of Israel have been hewn from the holy lamp. Spirit of man is the lamp of the Lord. Now, once this lamp has been kindled from the supernal Torah, the light upon it never ceases for an instant, like the flame of a wick which is never still for an instant. So when an Israelite has said one word of Torah, a light is kindled, and he cannot keep still, but sways to and fro from the flame of a wick. And so this is, I guess it's kind of like a inside-out type thing. According to this approach, we want to move our whole body in praying. According to this approach, it's kind of like an expression of our internal, like the kindling of our souls. I think there's something very powerful about that. I believe that the Torah has like deep spiritual energy. and the prayers too. So when you're engaged in that, something comes out and people just start moving. And so that could be a deeper explanation for that. So those are kind of like three different explanations. And this is kind of like a segue into the discussion about prayer. It's supposed to become something from something external to something internal and something you're connected to. So that's a little bit on SHUCKLING.
Can you make that print bigger, or is that what you were having the trouble?
So I was having trouble with it.
Never mind.
All right, maybe I can.
Finish off your transitions.
But then you lost some of it. Forget it.
Yeah. You can't see that, huh?
Doesn't matter. I'm listening to you.
Get up here.
You come up here?
I'll listen to you.
Okay.
If you select all the slides and go to transitions, you shut the transitions off. It'll stop moving.
Do you know how to do that? Do you want to tell me how?
Try.
All right. Here is, so let's talk a little bit about the laws of prayer, okay? So here are a few laws. It says that it's important to find a set place in the synagogue. That's a really special thing. So if you come to the synagogue, it's important to have your set place. If you do have your set place, supposedly that'll help you focus better, and you'll be able to connect to the associations that you had in that certain place and those experiences. So it's kind of like you're creating a certain like energy field, if you want to think about it that way, some sort of like place where all your experiences are happening. So it's good to go back to that place. There is a law like that. Try to find a set place where you're going to pray each time and try to stick to that. That's an important thing. It's okay, I bet. Okay, thanks. All right. Another thing, thank you. Another thing is that you can pray in any language, right? So people get mixed up with this. I'll sometimes in certain parts I'll recite them in English. Not because I don't know the Hebrew. Because sometimes you read the Hebrew so often that you don't like originally when I first started reading Hebrew, it's like it was something new. So I was trying to understand what it was saying, and then it was like, oh, I was paying attention to what I was saying. But after a while, I started saying all the Hebrew and I started just kind of like saying it all the time. And now it's almost like my routine. So now I'm going back to trying to read English sometimes to actually pay attention to what I'm saying. Sometimes when I'm in Shiva Minions, I'll say parts in English with the people. So it's effective and it's important and they can connect to it. So don't be ashamed, don't be shy to do that. And even if you're good with the prayers, it's okay sometimes to read some of them in English too. It can make you connect to it better and on a deeper level. That's an important thing. So that's another thing. You can daven in any language, ideally in Hebrew, but you can do it in any language. Okay. Another thing is morning prayer is usually from dawn or sunrise to 4 hours into the day. That's just a good thing to know. Okay. So the prayers, Shema, people recite into the 3rd hour into the day, and prayers into the 4th hour of the day. And the day is basically split up, the morning to the night split up into 12 hours. The light from sunrise to sunset is split up into 12 parts. That's kind of like, and so the first 3, that first 4, that's when you can pray, SHACHARIT. And from midday, you can pray already, you can pray the next prayer. That's just like another interesting piece to know. And what are these times here? I just want to show you this. We're not going to go into this in a super deep level, but it's something to know about. There are halachic times, okay? There's apps that can give you these times. You can find them on websites. And these are basically times that people use. These are times that are listed already in Mishnaic texts, like over 2,000 years ago. And these help you navigate when you can pray different parts of the prayer. So here you have, for instance, this is today's times. I don't think people are gonna. If you don't do this, you're not gonna start doing this. Okay, right after this class, it's not gonna change you. And I'm okay. That's fine. I just want you to know that this exists. If you don't know that this exists, just to know that there's people go by this, like myself. Okay, so dawn. You have dawn, and you have when you earliest you put Beth Tfiloh. You have sunrise. Sunrise is when you can start praying for the most part. And the latest Shema, the latest SHACHARIT, early prayer. This is the 3rd hour of the day, this is the 4th hour of the day, and you have midday, and then you have already sunset and then nightfall. After night, this is when you start praying. This is the afternoon prayer, this is the night prayer. There are certain times, back in Talmudic times, people used to go by the sunlight. And so that when it got dark, stars started to come out. That's when you pray evening prayer. Now, when I was first became more observant, I said to my sister, I was like, I don't know if I can pray yet. She's like, why don't you go outside and look at the stars? If they're out, you can start praying. That's really what you're supposed to be doing. But we have these charts that help us know easier what the time is. Okay, here are some words. Okay, so here are some 5 words. First one is Pesukei. This is a word that we learned before. It's from Pasuk. Pasuk is a verse. So Pesukei is verses. We're going to be talking about the Pesukei DeZimra. DeZimra is of praise. So this whole section of prayer we're going to be talking about today are verses of praise. Pesukei DeZimra. De is in Aramaic is of, praise Zimra. Zricha is sunrise. Shkia is sunset. People use that a lot. Like, oh, is it Shkia? Did Shkia happen yet? When's Shkia tonight? Because I want to know when you can pray the evening prayer. So that's a word that's important to know. Shkia. People don't use Zricha that much because people usually aren't up by that at that time, but Shkia is used a lot. And Ashrei is a prayer that's in Pesukei DeZimra, which we're going to learn about, and it means praiseworthy or content. So it says praiseworthy are those who dwell in your house. Ashrei is from the word Osher, Aleph Shin Resh, which is content, being content or happy or praise, or it's praiseworthy. Those are 5 words that are good to know connected to that. Okay. Any questions on any of this stuff? Cool. All right. Let's gain some familiarity with the Siddur. Let's start. Let's start with. So, what's going to be unique about this? Oh, this is actually something I need for. 1 second.
So do we keep our Nimcha and our Marv so close together here at the shul because of the Linyan aspect?
Yes. Yeah. So he asked. So in our shul, in our synagogue, we don't do mincha in the afternoon and Mariv, the late prayer, like in the night. We put them kind of sandwich them together. That's only because that's when people are around. So we'll try to do it that way. Okay. This is another important piece. I'm not going to be talking about why we pray today. This is a Siddur workshop. Why we pray we talked about in the beginner's class. I have the recording. I'll send it to you. If I have your emails here, I'll send that to you. And you can listen to that. We talked about that there. We talked about like the personal prayer, communal prayer, a lot of different things we talked about there. We also talked about the morning blessings there. We'll talk a little bit about them today. But those topics, because we talked about them, and I can send you the recording, we're not going to focus on that so we can have more time to focus on the Siddur and the different prayers. Okay. All right, so we have a text. So another important thing about this class is that I like texts, maybe because I'm like an academic or whatever. I like texts. I feel like I like to dig into text, and that's what we're kind of be doing here. We'll break it up with different things, but I want you to have a hands-on like comfortability with the text. So what I want to do right now is you have Adon Olam, the first page in your handout. Okay. Try to go over Adon Olam. Who here knows this prayer? All right. Okay. Who here wants to sing the prayer? All right. Good. Adon Olam. Okay. So that's how the kids sing it. So, who here knows what they're saying when they say this prayer? All right. 1. Okay. Yofi. So, I'm going to try to offer you a way to organize the prayer in a very clear way. But before that, let's take like 3 or 4 minutes to try to think about these questions. That's 2 or 3 minutes. Try to read the text in English on the right side. I did put a line there, if you see. That's already helping you find some sort of structure. Try to review it for like 2 or 3 minutes and try to maybe think about some of these questions. Is God distant or close? Is it a philosophical or emotional text? Why do you think we read it at the deathbed or upon going to bed? Okay, so try to just review it a little bit on your own. What?
No, I was surprised that your question, I guess that's part of why we're here. You read it, you can read this at deathbed?
You're supposed to.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I read this with. I read this with people all the time on their deathbeds.
And upon going to bed, I thought the Shema was is the Shema that's read before?
Yeah, Shema also.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the things you read this. You have Baruch Dana Emet. You have the Shema when a person's dying. But yeah, you read this. So if you want to take a moment just to kind of take a look at it. I was asking this important question. Like, I'm going to also try to introduce to you who wrote and who wrote the different parts and when they were written. So Adon Olam, it's not so clear who wrote it. Some people, it's Solomon ibn Gabriel, who wrote a lot of our songs. He lived in the 11th century. Others say it was Rav Chai Gaon, who lived in he was one of the Gaonim period. He lived also in the 11th century. Some say it goes back further, but the first time we see it appear like in the liturgy is in the 15th century. So it's not so clear who actually wrote it, but it's an old prayer. People argue it's at least like 1,000 years old. So now let's try to address some of these points here. Let's just start from this one. Why do you think we read it at the deathbed? Anybody? Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of references to death, essentially. I mean, I can also see why before you go to sleep, because it says, you place your soul with God before you. When I awake and when I sleep, I think there's something like holy thing for the soul while you sleep, and then it's supposed to be purified and perfected or something.
So,
and before death, because he's without beginning, without end, he's everywhere. So I guess it's saying even if someone's dying,
that's awesome.
This isn't the end. He's eternal. So you move into the next phase of God's this world.
That's really good. Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of like a reset button, just reading this, and that's why before you go to bed, to kind of cleanse your mind a little bit.
That's really good.
There's not too many things that go on in our daily life that are really that important outside of your connection with God.
That's really great. That's really good.
Helps you focus on.
Good. So those are really good ones. That the general one that Ancestors offers, just like what you mentioned in the very beginning, that with my spirit, my body, Lord, when I sleep and when I awake, I give my spirit over to God. So it's kind of like announcing, I'm giving my soul to you, God, even upon my deathbed. I'm ready to give my soul to you. So here, if you flip over the sheets I gave you, this is a code for understanding Adon Olam, and we'll try to address some of these questions that we have here. I split it into two parts that also had two subparts. Okay, and that line was just split it between part 1 and part 2 that you saw. The first part is talking about God beyond time. And so it basically says like the text here is a little different than the text you have, the translation, but I'm just going to read it to you. Eternal Master reigns supreme before all creation was drawn. When it's finished according to his will, then King his name was proclaimed to be. So this is a long time ago. Eternal Master. Before everything was created, God was the king. And then once everything was finished, God was called king. But God was always there. Right? God only became king once there were people there to call him king. But God was always there. When this our world shape shall be no more, and its majesty shall reign, he was, he is, and he will be in glory. So God will be forever. God was, God is, God will be. This is a statement that God is eternal. Okay. Now the next statement is about not just that God's eternal, but that God's strong. God's powerful. So it says like this: alone is he, there's no second. So God is the number one. And there's nothing compared to God. So already we're not just talking about God beyond time. This is God in time in relation to other things. Without division or ally, without beginning, without end, to him is the power and sovereignty. So I think it's really, all these pieces here point to the idea that God's sovereign, God's in charge, and there's no other. This is a different aspect of God, not just God's beyond time, that God's in time, and God's sovereign. There's no other like God. Now, the prayer, that's like the first part. The prayer transitions now to a more personal God. People don't pay attention to this when you're reading this. You start, and you start singing, but pay attention. There's a really big shift in all of it. You're really, before you even talk about God as mine, it was who, the lo, him, he, his. Now it's mine. It's my God. And so it transitions here. It says like this: he is my God, my living Redeemer, rock of my affliction in time of trouble. He is my banner and refuge, filling my cup the day I call. So there are a few different aspects here. That God's the Redeemer, God saves us, God's our refuge, and God also blesses us, fills our cup the day we call. So there's 3 levels there even. That God helps, God saves, and God even blesses us with much more than we could ever hope for. That's the idea that God's our personal Redeemer, and that God doesn't only help us in the physical, God helps us in the spiritual. And that's the last part here, where it says, in his hands I commit my spirit when I sleep and I awake. With my spirit, my body, the Lord is with me, I will not fear. And so God is, so I give my spirit to God when I go to sleep. And when I wake, when I go to sleep, it's because you go to sleep and God takes the soul. But when you wake, you're dedicating your spirit to God. Okay? And with my spirit, my body, and with my body and my spirit, God will be with me, and I will not fear. The Lord is with me, I will not fear. So it ends in that note where it's like you kind of put it all together, where God can do everything, God's sovereign, God's my God. So therefore, God's going to be with me, my body and my spirit, and therefore I will not fear. And so that's really, the last piece is I will not fear. I think that's also why they say it on the deathbed. Because you're basically saying, I'm going to give my spirit over to you. I believe in you. I believe that you're eternal. You're going to last, and I will not be afraid. And so it's kind of like why you say it before you go to bed. And so basically, God's distant and close. And God is, it's a philosophical in the beginning, but it's emotional at the second part. So really, there's a transition here. And why I'm bringing this now, and as we're starting our Siddur workshop, is because this is really another purpose of learning about prayer is that you're supposed to not only refer to God in a formal way, but try to create that personal connection with God in davening. It's really important. So if you can transition yourself from this like timeless God or this powerful God to this God of my Savior, my Redeemer, that's really like the ideal of learning about prayer. Yeah.
Well, it seems to me it's sort of like the two sides of the same coin that we always kind of go back and forth with our prayers in Judaism, how we refer to God. God Almighty, but God our Father. So
Yeah,
it seems
our Father, our King.
right. So it seems to encompass you're my King, you're everything, nobody can afford a candle to you, like all of these great things, but also you're there on a personal level when I need you. So it just
I mean, it's like it's two different aspects of the one.
right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. All right, so that's a little bit about. Is it happening? That's Adon Olam. Oh, okay. It decided to go back.
No, click on from current slide.
What?
If you click on from current slide, it'll start where we're at. Right? No, go up one. There you go.
Good.
And then
We have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Now you brought Adon Olam first. And I'm singing it at the end in Shul.
At the end of prayer at Shul. Well, first I brought it first because it really does appear in the beginning of the Siddur. Right? So people don't know that, but it does appear in the beginning of the Siddur. I'm just stalling because I don't know the answer to it. I don't know why we sing at the end of davening. I mean, we put all these things at the end of davening. Really, davening, which I'm kind of trying to show you, is that there's a certain skeleton, a certain structure, and a lot of appendages. Like different things were added on afterwards. And I think that's definitely if you go through the prayer, let's take a look. Let's take a look at the Siddur. I'll show you. So take a look just in the table of contents for a moment. Look on the bottom of the first the table of contents, the first page. So you have here page 185. You see that in the table of contents? The daily. So page 159. You see that? Page 159 is the reading of the Torah. That's part of the daily prayers. It was instituted a long time ago in the Talmud to be read on Mondays and Thursdays. After that, you have a daily psalm. See that? On page 185 in the table of contents. That was added on at a later period. We want to recite a daily psalm, a psalm per day. So we added that on. Later on, 10 Commandments. People recite the 10 Commandments. They recite the 13 Principles of Faith. All those things are things that we recite. Certain parts of prayer that we recite that are added on later aren't necessarily part of the the essential structure of the prayers. So I think Adon Olam is also that's like an explanation for that. So what I wanted to do here is I just wanted to kind of like take a look for a moment. Yeah.
How does Adon Olam fit in with the Shema at night?
Yeah. So it's the idea that Shema is you're accepting God as God is one, the oneship of God. And you're also, when you're saying Adon Olam, you're giving your soul over to God.
So which one do you say first?
Oh, I mean, it's you say them. There's a certain structure here. I can show you. Page 295. So they don't have it here. Some do, some don't. So I actually don't say it at night, but I know some prayer books do have it. I guess this one doesn't. All right, so yeah.
No.
All right, good. So what I want to do is let's do it really quickly. Let's see. Let's take a look at the table of contents. See how many parts the Siddur has. So you'll just know that by like the bigger the capital letters. The parts that they have the headings. Try to count how many headers are there for the table of contents. If you have an answer, just like raise your hand. And then 8. Yeah. So what? You missed one. Yeah. So there are 8. Okay. So I just want to just go over that in really quickly with you. Most Siddurim have this kind of structure. So the first one is the weekday prayers. Okay, that's on page 1 here, the first page there, and we're going to go through that as we go along. Our class is going to be focusing basically only on that, and only on the first weekday prayer, which is SHACHARIT, which is the morning first prayer of each weekday, SHACHARIT prayer. That's going to be our class, our workshop. There are 2 other ones each day. You have the morning, afternoon, and night. We're going to focus on the weekday morning prayer. That's all we're doing. But these other pieces are good to know about, so I was going to show you them for a second. Okay. The next page, page 303, is a Shabbat. There's a lot there. If you pay attention, it's almost as long as the daily one, right? So there's a lot we do on Shabbat. Then you have festivals. Most prayer books will have this. This is on page 729. There you have the Lulav, Hallel, Sukkah, Yizkor, Rosh Hashanah, all the stuff you need for the holidays. Afterward, the Slichot, that's page Slichos, that's page 925. All prayer books have that. That's like special supplications. Afterwards, there's blessings, which is Birkat HaMazon, blessings you make. Different blessings on pleasures, sights, and sounds. We talked about them a little bit in the beginner's workshop. And then page 1013 is the cycle of life. There you have all the different parts, Brit Milah, Zevet Haba, which is a ceremony for girls when they were born, marriage, Sheva Bracha. So you have all the different life cycles, Torah readings, and then in the end of this prayer book, they happen to have a lot of different guides to prayer, which are helpful. They have laws there. And if you turn to the very back, and I just want you to take a look at this, turn to the very back of your prayer book. These are the prayer books we use in our synagogue. Page 1239. You will find this in most prayer books. It's a weird chart, and I've never managed to follow it. It's just like kind of intimidating. I never managed to remember it either. 1239. There's a table of permitted responses. There's certain parts you're supposed to be quiet. Our synagogue doesn't always follow that. You're supposed to be quiet during davening. Let me say that again. You're supposed to be quiet and you're really not supposed to talk during parts of davening. Now, it happens, and when you do, here are actually charts. These charts appear in most prayer books. Charts when you can actually interrupt your prayer to answer different things. So I just want you to know that you might not use this, but I just want you to know this is here in different prayer books. Okay, a lot of them have this. They're very hard to follow and to remember. I never succeed in doing it. Okay, I just want to show you page 1242. This is helpful. 1242, Psalms for special occasions. Not every prayer book has this, but this is nice that they put it in. If you need different Psalms for different occasions, they're here. You can take a picture of this on your phone if you want, and you can have it in your phone. Actually, you won't have the Psalms. But if you have the numbers of the Psalms, you can find them online. Okay, so here are Psalms for special occasions. And page 1243 and 1244 are helpful too. People don't know this. But if you come to shul and you want to recite Kaddish, you don't know how to say it in Hebrew, here's the transliteration of it to English. Both types of Kaddishes that we say, the short one and the long one. So this is a good thing to know. Okay. It's a little bit on that. All right. So I'm going to skip through this one because it's a lot of writing, but I just want to give you a basic idea. So we pray 3 times a day. In the beginner's class, if you listen to that recording, we offer why you pray 3 times a day. One explanation was that it corresponds to the sacrifices in the temple. Sacrifices in the temple were brought 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and certain parts were burnt overnight. So that's why we pray 3 times a day. Other opinions say that it corresponds to the 3 forefathers who prayed at these different parts of the day. And here's another explanation. It's really beautiful, I think. This is from the 11th century. He says that you need like this recharge every few hours of spirituality. And so the sages inserted that we pray at different intervals of the day so you can charge your batteries. And it's a way kind of like the plug-in. It's like people at work, they'll have like yoga moments, or I don't know, or like meditation at work. We were doing that for a little bit here. So this is like an older version of that, where you plug in, you connect to spiritual energy every day. And he extends it though in a really nice way to the week. He's like, every week you have the struggles of the whole work week. We need a time to plug in. When's that? Shabbat. Then he says it happens every month, Rosh Chodesh. And throughout the year we have the festivals. And so he says he expands and extends it. And in this book called the Kuzari, chapter 3, verse 5, part 5, where he says that's how you can understand why we pray 3 times a day and why we have these little insertions, dosages of spirituality throughout. So it's like, I think that's a nice way to look at that, and look at Shabbat too. People look forward to Shabbat because it's a time not only to rest your body, but to rest your soul, or to replenish your soul. All right, so we're kind of moving, but I want to make sure we get through stuff. Okay, so here we have the structure of SHACHARIT. So what I want to talk about today, which we'll probably talk about next class, which is fine, is here's a structure. I got this from a book that's helpful. This is book, My People's Prayer Book. This is a helpful book. It's a full set, actually, of like 9 or 11 books that go through all of prayer. So they have nice charts in here, and they have nice explanations for all the prayers, and they have it from all different types of perspectives, like Jewish law, historically, a feminist voice. They have all kinds of different, like 6 or 7 different approaches to the prayer book. I use this for, there's a Haggadah like this too. I mentioned that in the Haggadah class. All right, so this is from there. And here is a structure of how prayer in general is structured. All right, so you have the morning blessings. Morning blessings can be found on page 3 here in your handout. Let's take a look at that for a moment. This is what people do first thing in the morning. If people like in religious people, Orthodox religious, or anybody who wants to pray and they do this, this is what they do. Okay, it gets complicated when you start. Okay, these are blessings. We went over these in the introductory class. I just want to show you them for a second and just show you that there's an order to them. These were instituted already in Talmudic times. A lot of them are mentioned. This goes back like 2,000 years. And there's an order to them. The order is like this. Turn to page 4 for a second. When you wake up, these are prayers you make. The first thing you do, you open your eyes. I'm happy. It's good to be alive. You open your eyes. You say, "Blessed are you, God, who gives sight to the blind." What do you do next? You get dressed. So at one point, people were making these blessings as they were doing these acts. They got dressed. Baruch atah Hashem, who clothes the naked. The next blessing they would make was they start stretching. Matir Asurim, who sets the captives free. Then you get up from bed. Who raises those who are bowed down, right? And it goes on like this. So he spreads the earth above the water. So we're about to step out into the world. There was a belief that God spread the earth and the waters. So you affirm that. Then you go on, provided with all I need. That usually refers to your shoes for some reason. That's what they say. To the point that some people don't say this on Yom Kippur because you're not wearing your shoes. People walking without shoes. So I might not be saying anything. Next one is who makes the steps of man or human. Next one is you put on your belt, girds Israel with strength. You put on your hat, crowns Israel with glory. And the next one is who gives strength to the weary. So we're about to go into the world, so we want to be with extra strength. So I just want to show you that there's a certain structure to those morning blessings. That's the first part of our davening experience. Okay, morning blessings. They're called Birkot HaShachar, blessings of the Shachar, which is the morning. Birkot is blessings, HaShachar is morning. The next part of prayer is Pesukei DeZimra. Okay, or DeZimra. This means verses of song or praise. After that, we have the Shema, the Amida. We have this Tachanun where we put our heads down, and you have the Torah. This is the order that they put it in. Which I don't know. I don't completely connect to this order, but this is the order that they use. They basically see the prayer as an ascent all the way into the reading of the Torah. That's how they view prayer. This really, all of prayer is just to prepare you for your moment of Sinai when you read the Torah in the synagogue, which is only done twice a week actually, Mondays and Thursdays. But it's really supposed to elevate you to there. But usually I usually see it this way. Okay, it didn't work. So
How come only Mondays and Thursdays? You might have told us that before.
yeah, and so you don't go 3 days without reading Torah. Now, why is it not good to go 3 days? I don't know.
Why not every day?
Yeah, why not every day? That's a good question. I'll look into that. You just say
Encouragement lasts 3 days. I mean, you more nervous.
that could be it. That's a good. But I'll look into it in a deeper level. But so the order usually is like this. And I'll just explain to you what these 3 parts mean, and this can make it very clear. Okay. Pesukei DeZimra. This is you get up, you make the blessings that we saw. Okay, you get up, start out on the right foot. The next part is Pesukei DeZimra. This is like warm-ups. This is like stretching. Okay, you're stretching, you're warming up, and these are verses of song. We're going to see there are 5 psalms. We're going to see this 5 psalms that you recite then, Ashrei and other psalms. This is to get you warmed up. This is like when someone's throwing around the football on the sidelines. That's kind of what you're trying to do, getting warmed up. The Shema and its blessings are supposed to help you affirm that God is one, and to help you understand, kind of connect to God and really who God is, and that God is your source of blessing. Once you do that, then you can enter into the 18 blessings, the Amidah. The Amidah is when you stand quietly and you pray. You can chuckle, you can not chuckle, whatever. And there's where you ask God for all the things you need. And so really, you need to go through the stage of accepting God and God's yoke, as they say, the Shema, in order to really prepare yourself and have a deep davening experience where you can say, oh, God's the source of my blessing. Now I'm going to go to God for my blessing. So I usually see, this is the structure I usually see. 1, 2, 3. And this is just like waking up. So really it's like 1, 2. This is accepting God, this is going to God, and this is to warm you up, and this is just waking up. So it's kind of like, see that. Questions on that? Or?
What's the one after
The one after that is silent prayer. This is like when you do, you ask for forgiveness from God. It's called Tachanun. So they put that in there.
Where's read the Torah?
Read the Torah is here.
Okay.
Yeah. So they see this as a structure. I stop here for the most part, but they want to see it as like it's all building up to the reading of the Torah. But I think it's not so good in the sense that you only read the Torah twice a week, and you have so many other times when you're. I don't know. I usually don't see it that way, but I brought this. Okay, so here is the internal structure. 1 second, let me see. Okay, good. We're doing okay.
So it's a minimum of 2, but you could actually break the Torah portion of the week down and read part of it each time, correct?
People only do it on Mondays and Thursdays. I don't know why. Maybe that's like when the community was together. I don't know exactly. I have to look into that, like why it was instituted specifically on those days and like it's not split up.
Study every day, though, right?
What?
Study every day?
Yeah, you're
Study every day.
supposed to study every day. And actually, that's a good point. This Shema, some people say if you don't study you're supposed to study every day. Now, if you don't, some people say just you're studying the Shema. That it can count as your study every day. Now, ideally, you're supposed to do more. The more you do, the better. But that can count also. It doesn't really study in the morning and the night. We all say Shema in the morning and the night. So, or if you do, you do that. Okay. Here's the structure of Pesukei DeZimra. Okay, so let's take a look at our handouts. Okay, we have 5 minutes. Okay, let's take a look at our handouts. That's the right one. All right, so page. This is the wrong one. All right, page 5. Okay, Pesukei DeZimra, the warm-ups. Okay, warm-ups also have a certain structure. You don't just jump into the warm-ups. You do some stretching beforehand, get going, and so the structure is basically like this. Baruch Shamar, which is on page 5 to 6, that is the beginning of this warm-up. Okay, you are framing what you're doing. I'm about to praise God. I'm framing it, and we'll go into this next class, I guess. what we say during that prayer. But it's basically you're framing it. And there's a framing before, and there's a bookend on the other end also. Yishtabach. These are the bookends. Okay? Baruch Shamar already appeared in a prayer book in the 9th century, and it could be from before that. It's an older prayer. There are 2 parts to it, we'll see. One is later than the other, but that goes back a long time. Then the main part of Pesukei DeZimra is, and this is why it's called verses of praise, is there are 5 or 6. I think was that 6? 5, 6. Okay. It's 6, right? I always get confused. It's 6 psalms in the middle. That's really Pesukei DeZimra. These are psalms of praise to God, and that's what we're doing during that time. And it's bookended by Yishtabach, which is also called Birkat Hashir. And so this is the bookends. In between, later on, these pieces were added. Biblical interludes. Okay, that's what they call in that book. Really, this is the structure. It's really 3 parts. 1, 2, 3, and these are added on a little bit later. Okay? And it's the origin of doing this part of prayer is the Talmud says like this. The Talmud says, somewhere here. Oh, no, that's your sheet. Here it is. So the Talmud says like this. In the Talmud it says, whoever says the psalm, a praise of David. This already goes back. This goes back like to the over 1,700 years ago. Okay, it says like this. Whoever says the psalm of praise of David, which is Psalm 145, 3 times a day, is guaranteed a portion in the world to come. There's this idea of saying Psalm 145. We're going to see that it's called Ashrei. It goes through all the alphabet, and there's a certain structure to that too. And somebody who says that every day, that's considered like a praiseworthy thing because it really does cover a lot of important principles. And so their theory in this book is that it all started out there with Psalm 145, and then it got extended to up to 150 because it says whoever finishes the psalm, and they figured out it could be that you finish the whole book of Psalms because it only goes to 150, and so that's their theory. But it really started from this idea of 145, and then later on they put these bookends in, and then it became this whole Pesukei DeZimra, and so it really starts from that Psalm 145, and that's why they say if you're in a rush. Okay, this is an insider tip. If you're in a rush, what do you say? Baruch Shamar 145 and Yishtabach, and you move on. If you come late to davening, don't come late to davening. But if you do, that's what you do. It's for that reason because 145 is the centerpiece of the Pesukei DeZimra.
Could you do the same if you're not here at shul but you're pressed for time, like say?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you just gave us a hint now because
Well, that's.
we're always trying to catch up with all the speeding ones.
But the thing is, I know. So the thing is that you're ideally supposed to make up the other ones after. Right? So there was this guy in yeshiva. I remember when had made a mark on me when I first became more observant, like 20 years ago. I remember we were all I remember he had to rush to go to this. He rushed out of yeshiva. He's now a rabbi. I remember he rushed out of yeshiva all the time. I was like, where's he going? He had this other program he was going to. I remember I once took a bus ride with him, and he was making up all the other psalms. And I was impressed by that because he'd have to do it. Nobody's watching him. He was careful to do that. Maybe that's why he's a rabbi today. But it's important to try to make them up if you can, right? But that's okay. So that's the structure of that. It's just a little bit on why on the fact that it's like a warm up. We're not doing that. But this is kind of like another source sees it as a warm up exercise, and maybe let's take a look at the structure, and next week we'll go over it. Let's take a look at the structure for a moment, okay? Page 5, Baruch Shamar, and that spreads to page 6, okay? There really are 2 parts to Baruch Shamar. We'll just do this one more minute, and then we'll continue next class. Page 5 and page 6. This is the first part of Baruch Shamar. This is added on later. They don't know when exactly, but this is basically we're going to talk about like what the structure is behind this. But this is like blessed is God, blessed is He, blessed is He, blessed. All these types of ways that God's blessed. Then you move on to page 6, where you actually have the blessing. Okay, this is important. The reason why, remember that chart, that like obsessive chart where it's like, I showed you at the end of the prayer book where you can answer here or don't answer here. The reason why they're really careful with that is because when you start this part, you make a bracha. You make a blessing. On page 64, you make a blessing. Blessed are you, Lord, our God. The Pesukei DeZimra starts with a blessing and it ends with a blessing. So this is all one big blessing. So it's as if we're in one big blessing and you don't want to stop in the middle of that blessing. It's like when you're checking for chametz, you make a blessing, you're supposed to not really talk until you finish finding your chametz. And so once upon a time we hit these like the 10 little pieces and we couldn't find one, it was like kind of frustrating because we couldn't talk for a bit, but we ended up finding it. But in any case, when you make a blessing, you're not supposed to talk until you finish what you're doing. So that's why people don't talk. So really, there's a blessing here and there's a blessing here. And that's what the blessing is on page 64, it appears. I just want to show you for just one more moment some of the things we're going to be going over next week. This is I skipped over the biblical interlude. Okay, I skipped over that here. You don't have that here. So we're not going to be reviewing that together. Pay attention. This is page 65. Oh, actually, yeah. Page 65, we go all the way to 73. Yeah, page 5 is actually page 65 in the prayer book. And then page 6 is actually page 65. Page 7 is actually page 73 in the prayer book. So I skipped the biblical interlude. Okay, there's stuff there. We're not going to go over that. This is Psalm 145. People don't know this. Is that Pesukei DeZimra is just basically 6 psalms in a row. They don't know this. If you go through Tehillim, it's 6 psalms. If you look on the right side, it says this is Psalm 145, page 72. Look on the right side of page 74. On page 8. The right side of page 8. It says PS 146. You see that? PS 147. Keep going, page 9. Psalm 148. 149, 150. That's all of Pesukei DeZimra. And that's what it means. Verses of praise. That's what it is. The last part is page 10, Ishtabach. That also has 2 parts, but it ends with a blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam melech chai olamim. And then you bookended it with a blessing, and you're ready to go on to the next part of prayer. So next week we're going to go over this a little bit more in depth, the different psalms, and we're also going to go over Kaddish, and we're going to talk about other things too. That's a little bit on Pesukei DeZimra and an introduction to the prayer book. Have a good night.